Hi everyone, welcome to Retire on YouTube channel page. This is Supreet CV and today we are in the fourth formal training of this chess classes. Okay, in this video today we are understanding what is check, what do you mean by check, and in which way the king is said to be in check by different pieces. The pieces may be like minor pieces or the major pieces like this. So let's see practically on your screen now. You have a king in its original position from your right piece, and just consider the opponent's pawn is on here. Opponent's pawn is on d3 position, d3 square. So now by moving the pawn to one square front, how do you say this is check? Because the pawns have a capacity to capture any pieces on diagonally. But look at here, the diagonally the king is in threat. So threat is nothing but like check. Usually the other pawns will have a name called threat, but now in this case we can call it as king is in check. This is the thing. One thing we need to remember, though the pawns move in the straight direction, it's not mean that in the straight direction if there is a king then this is not a check. This is not a check. Only thing, if your opponent's king is in the way of getting captured by the particular piece, then it is said to be as check. Here's the check now. Let's see an example now. This is about the the pawn. Let's take knight here. So I have placed the king as usual on the e3 position, and you can see the knight here is on nd5. nd5 is a square, and now the king is in check by this knight, because you know how the knight moves. The knight moves in the L position, and now as you can say, this is in check. Okay, this is by knight. Let's look at another piece. It's the bishop. You know how the bishop moves. It moves in a diagonal way. So here now the white is in again. If you put it in the same square, it's in the black square, and the black bishop is giving a check to this king. Suppose if the king was somewhere in the white square, then this bishop which is placed in the black square can never give a check to the king even after making so many moves, because always the bishop moves only in the black squares, so it cannot give check to the king, or it can be said as king will never be in check with that black bishop. So this is about the check by the bishop. Let's go with another major piece now, and now you have a rook. Rook moves. You know how the rook moves. It moves in the straight and left and right to any extent. So now at right extent you have the king. Your opponent's king is in threat. So king in threat means it's nothing but king is in check. Now I'll take the most powerful piece. It's a queen now. Let's take a queen. You know how the queen moves diagonal. Queen moves diagonally, straight, left, right, at any directions, 360 degree, and this is a powerful, and you knew that queen can make a check now. This, because there's a check now, and it was here, right? And you can also move queen just to right side of the d3 square, and from d3 square king is in check again, we can say. So this is about check is nothing but you're just threatening your opponent's king, or maybe your opponent is threatening your king, but it's not mean that the game is over. Check is just a check. It's not checkmate. There's a different meaning for checkmate. So this is only about the check now. Okay, now let's see what can be done when the check is given, what the king can do. This is the main thing. Let's bring back to the king's original position, and let's bring you your opponent's pawn is here. This was the first example we just discussed, how the pawns can give a check to the king. So if your pawn from d3 square to d2 will make your king in check. Okay, now king has only two options. One is either to move away from the square so that it can nullify the check, or it can capture from the same pawn which it got check. So that means your king, you need to just move away from the square so that you will not be in check again, or you can just go and capture. These are the two ways a king can do. Okay, but there is some condition. Thing is like so now there are two pawns in your opponent's team, and he's moving from d3 to d2 square, and when now it's again check. I told you the second condition is that first condition is to just move away from this one, the second one is to just capture this, but here you cannot capture it because another pawn from your opponents is supporting this pawn on the d2 square. So if you bring it practically, like so, you're going to still, if you like don't obey the rules, and if you just capture, this is called illegal. This is called illegal move. Like we can say it practically. Okay, again in turn your opponent second pawn can capture your king and your game is over. That's how we say. And now your king is in check by your opponent's bishop. You can either move here so that this is not now check, because bishops can only have the capacity to capture any piece or threat any piece only by diagonal. So now you're exactly straight or down, we can say. Now it's not called as a check. But one thing is that one either you can capture this again, but one more thing, that should not be supported by any pawn. So now this is a supporting, right? So your knight, your opponent's knight is supporting your bishop. Now you cannot capture it. The only thing you just need to move somewhere to get nullified the check. Let's see another example now. Maybe let's take rook now. Now is your king is in check by your opponent's rook. Now you can capture it, but if this is the case, now your opponent's pawn is supporting your rook, then you cannot capture here. Just you need to move away from the pieces. Now where are you going to move? See, you cannot move to these squares d2 and f2, because if you move to d2 and f2, it will be still checked by this rook, because rook moves left and right to any direction. The only two squares you get from your king from its way is f1 and d1, so there will be no check. I think you understood about the very basic things about check and what should be done when the check is given. So based on this, we'll solve some of the puzzles. So here is the puzzle number 1. So assume now you're playing from your black and your king is on the e file, that's e8. We say it's e8, and your opponent is with the 3 pawns. So 1 is here, 2 he is in 3 here. Now it's only about talking about the check. It's now we are not discussing about, oh, what if this pawn reaches here and get promoted, what if this pawn reaches and promoted. We are not discussing about that. It's only about the check. The task is such that, now tell me which pawn of your opponent has a capacity to give check to your king, also not being captured by your king. That's the task now. This means if any pawn of your opponent out of these 3 makes a check, gives a check to you, your king should not be in a position to capture that. So which is that pawn? This is the question here. So take your time and think about 30 seconds or 1 minute, and then resume this video. And after you resume this video, let's see now. Suppose if you move this pawn, so there'll be, what is the check there? You cannot give a check by this pawn. This is very clearly, easily understood. And if you move this pawn to this one, it is still check, but thing is, your king can capture your opponent's pawn. But the condition is, your opponent's pawn should not be captured. So I told you to find which pawn is that, and that is this pawn on the c file. If your c file pawn moves to c7, then you cannot capture it, because it's supported by the b6th pawn. So this is about the puzzle number 1. Let's go with the puzzle number 2. Now look at on your screen. Now you're back to white position and your king is on c3 square and your opponent's knight is on c7 thing. Now tell me, your opponent's knight can give check to your king in how many different ways? There will be different ways by making different moves by the knight. So that's what this question is. So tell me, your king can be in check by your opponent's knight, but in how many different ways? Pause your video. And after resuming the video, I'll be solving here. So knight from nc7 to here nb5 can make a check to your king. Not only this one, and also this knight can come to this one, that is nd5, and again here this will be check again. So there are totally 2 ways your opponent's knight can make you in a threat of check. Easy. Let's go. Let's make it a little difficult now on these puzzles. Now you're back to black now, and your king is in a position of ke7. We call the square name is e7, but your king, if you're adding your king, then it's called ke7. Now tell me, your king can be in check by your opponent's bishop. There may be 2 or 3 more than 3 ways your king can be in check by your bishop, but one thing condition is, tell me only on one which way your king cannot capture your opponent's bishop even after a check. Pause your video and find the answer. After you resume, let's see now. Suppose if your bishop on a5 square, and if it comes to d8 square, this is the way you can easily capture it. So this cannot be a solution for this puzzle. The puzzle is your opponent's bishop should not be captured. So that means the other way is to move to this one square. Yes, right? Is it so? bb4 can give a check, and king cannot capture in turn, because king cannot move to an extent of 3 or 4 squares diagonally. It has only capacity to move only 1 square diagonally, but any direction. So this is the solution for this puzzle. This is about the 3rd puzzle. Let's move to the 4th puzzle now.